record. There we go. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and taking the time out your diary to join us for this webinar session with Marcus Wiley, Leading in a Virtual World. And Marcus is the Head of Learning and Experience at Insights Group, who many of you know. And just a special thank you to Insights Group because they are sponsoring our Director of the Year Young Director category, with the final event being held on the 8th of September. So I'll send you some details after this session. I hope you can join us. So I'll just ask those who've joined the call to put themselves on mute, please. And just to record any questions or observations you might have along the way, if you could share them in the chat column. It's going to be a really interactive session, but if there's still some questions, we'll come to them throughout or at the end. So thanks so much, and I'll hand over to Marcus.
Thank you very much, Kirsty, and great to be with you all today. I'm just going to share a couple of slides, if that's okay, and hopefully we'll have a great time for the next 45, 50 or so minutes, just exploring leading in a virtual world, something that we have all been doing over the past few months. The focus of today's session is going to be around self-awareness and the importance of that during these times in particular. And one of the questions I want to explore with each and every one of you is, how might a better understanding of who we are and the approach of others, right, that we work with, that we lead and that lead us, how might a better understanding of that help us to work more effectively together in a virtual world and in these virtual environments that we're in. Throughout the session, I will be looking for opportunities for each and every one of you. Certainly, we're happy to share a PDF of these slides, David. Throughout the session, for each and every one of us, actually, including myself, to build some esteem around who we are and to reflect on what is our purpose and where are we going and what's our direction. And how can we express ourselves authentically as leaders in this world and be resilient in these tough times, right? It's not only are we leading in a virtual world, but it's actually a global crisis as well. So, and how can we be centered as leaders? Because if we can be centered for ourselves, that will help in the teams where we lead, and manage, and also for our own people to be centered. A little bit about me, Kirsty did say a couple of things. I describe myself as a liberator, an entertainer, initiator. So my intention today, and I see a couple of faces that are familiar on the call, a couple of people know me reasonably well or know of me. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So the liberator in me wants to help you uncover a new potential for yourself and find a way for you to be even more of who you are and even more brilliant, even more effective than you are up to this point. The entertainer in me wants to engage and enthrall you along the way. So this little chat box, I'm going to keep the window open. I have 3 screens on the go, by the way. So I didn't need the tips on opening up in separate windows. I need the tips on how to manage 3 separate screens. But I'm hoping to engage and enthrall you with some content today. And in the chat box, if you have thoughts, things that you like, things that you would want to observe, a question that you have, a piece of wisdom that you would like to share, then I believe the knowledge comes from the wisdom of this group and this collective. Certainly not just me, I have some inputs. And the initiator in me wants to help you find something to get you kick-started on a development focus for yourself as a leader. Now that might be a reminder, a refresh, it might be something that's been hanging about for a few years that you've just not quite got into, or it might be something that's very much top of mind or right at the front of your heart that you want to initiate and begin to do something to help you be more effective in your role and in your life. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to follow up and ask any questions later. Getting started though, as you reflect on this question on what you bring to leadership, I think for each and every one of us on this call, right, we probably have our own view on what an effective leader is. We have our own people that we look up to, we have our own things that we aspire to be and do, and now we've had to insert this little virtual thing in it. So being an effective leader begins with us, and if we want to lead in a virtual world effectively, again, it doesn't change it. It begins with us. And my proposition that I'd like to share with you today, ladies and gentlemen, that it all begins with self-awareness. And if you can understand who you are, particularly in high pressure moments, in tough moments, in thriving moments, and you can be a bit more aware of your impact on others, positive and negative, right? Because each of us have an impact on other people that is positive and negative. It's not all positive and it's not all negative, at least I hope it's not. Well, kind of hope it's all positive, but you get the idea. And if we can be aware of who we are in these times, and we can know what really matters to us, then that allows us to behave in alignment with our core purpose and values and express ourselves authentically. And we can bring our full self into our lives. These are just interesting and tough times that we've had to navigate over the past few months, and it's not finished, right? It's going to continue for the foreseeable future. So we have to show up as leaders in different and better ways. One of the things I want to focus on as we get started is to think about what are some of the different traits of effective virtual leaders, and have you reflect on how have you been building and maintaining relationships over the past while. If you're used to more face-to-face interaction, I know some of that's coming back on, but how have you been building and maintaining relationships? And some of the key relationships you hold, which ones need to be built a bit more and which ones need to be rekindled or maintained a little bit more? And as you strive to deliver results in your teams, in your organizations, and in your business, how are you providing the vision and direction that your people need to generate results? Because the vision is not so clear right now. So is that a more rhythmic daily experience or weekly experience or monthly experience? Or are you visioning a little bit further out because business is thriving? Or is your business really under pressure just now and you're trying to figure out what the next step is? To help you deliver the results that you need to deliver and for your people, there is something about providing some sense of vision of what's happening next. And it might just be tomorrow or next week or next month. And there is something about the direction which is important. And a little bit later in the session, we'll talk to some different aspects of transformational leadership around how we balance building relationships with delivering results and how we balance being centered and grounded in who we are, but also lifting our heads to see over the horizon and think about this vision and direction space. So that's a little bit of context about what the session is going to be about. Thanks for your comment.
I just don't think he's, from what I've heard and again what I've observed.
Somebody else is coming in on the game, which is good, with their microphone. So let's get started, and let's talk a little bit more about some of the different traits that are particular for a successful virtual leader. Lots of things we need to do to be a successful leader, but in terms of being a successful virtual leader, here are 5 traits that I think, and we at Insights think, are really important to pay attention to and focus on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend a minute on each: empathy, communicating with impact, accountability and ownership, accessibility and flexibility. I would encourage you through this session to be active either in the chat box, or you might have like a paper and pen where you want to grab a couple of notes, or you might have like a digital interface where you want to capture. Please don't just sit here and listen in. Try and be active and grab. If there's something of value for you, if there's something that can increase your effectiveness and your performance by 1%, couple of percent, just grab it. If you leave this session today with 2 or 3 nuggets, then it will have been a valuable investment of an hour of your time. And I know how precious time is for each and every one of you. So let's start with empathy. As leaders, we need to recognize that when we work more remotely or in a remote workplace, that that can create special situations and that require more empathy. And actually, because we're in this global crisis, this global pandemic, and there's a lack of physical proximity that we've been encountering these past 4 or 5 months and continue to encounter, for us as leaders, we need to just be that little bit more aware of the questions that are popping into our people's head. Questions like, like, am I going to get sick? Will my family get sick? Is my safety at risk? Could I lose my job? Am I going to be on furlough forever? Am I coming back? Where's the money coming from? What is my home at risk? Is my family at risk? All these different types of questions that many of our people have been experiencing, And as leaders, it's an opportunity for us to practice active listening and inquiry, and showing a bit more empathy. Now, as a lad from Dundee, I always avoided the word empathy, because if you say empathetic in Dundee, it sounds like you're saying empathetic, and as in I'm pathetic. And so I've always kind of avoided the word, but the importance that I'm experiencing of empathy with and for my people, because we're not just working at home, we're working at home in a crisis, and I've got to know and understand my people, and then me, in a whole different way, right? There's a whole different relationship. So how much time are you investing with your colleagues to listen and inquire, as opposed to tell and share, right? You know, so, and can you invest a little bit more time to say, how are you? How are you doing? Are you okay? Is everything okay? And actually, I'm struggling a little bit today. Do you mind if I share? And just creating a little bit more of an empathetic environment. Because of the lack of physical proximity, it's extremely important, or certainly something to pay attention to. Let's move along. If I think about communicating with impact, virtual teams can feel disconnected, right, from the leaders. And the best virtual leaders are creating regular and meaningful communication. Let me emphasize meaningful communication, right? So using multiple channels to regularly connect these little devices and WhatsApp groups and Microsoft Teams and Skype and Zoom, and sending emails and talking to people and all these different things, multiple communication channels. And what is meaningful communication? Well, creating that connection with your people, and finding ways to give praise, and also finding ways to reaffirm, like, a long-term view. So if somebody does something well, or somebody achieves something, putting that in a context to say, that's really good because that's helping us with our long-term aim. And our long-term aim might be a month away or 3 months away, as opposed to years away, right? So how are you using multiple communication channels to reaffirm direction, to share praise, to acknowledge, to connect? And now in this situation of a global pandemic, one word of caution, you must be careful not to be too optimistic. Confidence is very good, right? People are looking for leaders for confidence, but keep it realistic, right? So err on the side of optimism would be my advice than pessimism, but not too optimistic, because people are checking in on how real things are. So is there an area that you can increase meaningful communication and transparency? Because we're working remotely, it's really helps to be a little bit more transparent as to what's going on. People are hungry for data, they're hungry to feel connected, they're hungry for information. So perhaps one thing to take away is thinking about, is there a relationship or a person where I could increase transparency a little bit more with my people or with my stakeholders? Something to reflect on. Moving along, and I'll be here all day talking about some of this stuff. I see the chat's buzzing a little bit, or beginning to buzz. Next area is around accountability and ownership. And to be successful as virtual leaders, we do set clear goals and expectations from the beginning. And we have to put in, and you've probably done this, right? You're probably finding putting in more regular checkpoints to monitor progress and provide course correction. The future is a little bit uncertain for us as leaders, but we need to keep our people focused and moving forward. So I would suggest that this is a good time to foster teamwork and really to ensure that our people are outcome focused and keep considering focus on goals and targets. Short-term goals and targets are fine. Medium-term ones are great if we can get to those. But if we can find ways to celebrate success often, it creates momentum and it creates confidence and it creates esteem and it creates belief. So there is something about accountability and ownership and not leaving things for a couple of weeks or a month with no dialogue, but helping people find the successes, because that keeps the inspiration up and the motivation up. So I guess the reflection I have, which you might share, is am I clear about where things are going? Am I clear about the outcomes? Am I clear about, I love that point, Roger, you know, if we focus on outcomes, if we do that, get to the outcomes really quickly, we've still delivered the same amount of value. And so the hours don't count as much as the outcomes. But really good for us to readjust and think about how we do that clearly with and for our people. Moving along, the fourth one out of 5 is accessibility. So as virtual leaders, really important to make ourselves available and encourage our team and our people to contact with us appropriately, of course, right? You know, not every waking hour of the day, not talking 24/7, but because we're not in the face-to-face transaction, or haven't been, or might not be, to lead in a virtual world, we have to be really intentional about our accessibility. Because now more than ever, people feel that they can reach out to their, need to feel they can reach out to their leaders, sorry, for direction, for reassurance, for some empathy, or whatever it might be. So make sure you're accessible, and look out for those diaries, right? The day where the diary is solid, meeting. Actually, you need space in there to be available. And if you've built in some of these small regular connects, then that's helpful. So you might need to consider, do you need some space for your people to check in with you? And then the last one of these 5, before I move things along, is around flexibility. And great virtual leaders embrace flexibility, and they have trust in their teams, and they let them work in ways that best suit their schedules, you know. So I'm working at home here with a wife who's also working, and 3 kids who just started back at school. I'm needing some flexibility in my life, and my leader, my manager, is helping me to help. I'm helping him to understand that, and he's helping with me. So how are you being flexible, perhaps more flexible than you might have been? Because if we can create the right environment for our people and we can trust them, then we'll get the best out of them. If we're in a place where we're having thoughts about that person's not really delivering, or they're not being productive, then that's an issue of trust, right? So we need to get to the bottom of that. But as to lead in a virtual environment, you need to be more flexible, because you're not keeping an eye on everybody. It's impossible, right? You don't know what they're doing. You need to trust it's okay that they're making a cup of tea, or going outside for a breath of fresh air, or spending some time with their kids because their kids are tugging at them. You know, it's probably been happening to you, or grandkids, or whatever it might be, right? It's probably been happening to you, and you do it. So how can you embrace that flexibility for your people, and have the dialogue, right? Just have the dialogue with your people to say, how do you retain your productivity? How can I support you? Is there any flex you need? You know, is it better for you to start a little bit later, work a little bit later, and do things around your life? Because life is completely integrated just now. It is manic. So yeah, so just some thoughts about the traits of really successful virtual leaders. And what I was going to do was ask Kirsty to load a poll here, if that's okay. And you've heard me talk a little bit about each of these 5 areas. And I'd like you to think about the next three weeks. And is there one of these areas that you'd like to increase your competence in? Feel free to increase your competence in more than one if you want. But the poll has been loaded just now for you to suggest, if there was one of these 5 traits where I think, yeah, room for improvement for me, it might be empathy, it might be communicating with impact, accountability and ownership, accessibility, flexibility. Please vote now, and then we'll share what the results are for those of us that are on the call today. Kirsty, is there anything coming in the chat that you'd really rather I would pay attention to that I might have missed? Some people writing in good chunky pieces of text.
There's lots on there, actually, just lots of observations and lots of agreement, lots of people's thoughts on what you've been talking about. Couldn't see any particular questions, but yeah, lots of good pieces there that we can share with you and others afterwards. We've got 80% voted, so I'll give it another few seconds.
Yeah, not a life or death choice, this poll, right? It's just like, if you were to focus on one for 21 days, create a bit of a habit around it, improve, which one would you focus? Just picking up Aidan. Hi Aidan, nice to be on a call with you. Hopefully better than your governance reading there. And yeah, I'm definitely finding that too, that people are working too hard and not taking enough time out. You know, the level of busyness in the world has gone through the roof, right? And because people are working at home, there isn't the natural breaks of leaving a house and going to a workplace or coming back. So people are definitely blurring those lines. And actually, as leaders, we need to help people find the productivity, but to do it not by working every hour of the waking day. And look at that. So nearly half of us are thinking about how can we have more meaningful communication and perhaps more transparency so we can communicate with impact for our people. That's fascinating. But every one of these is touched And the poll limited you to one, but limited you one. But please feel free to focus on a couple or more of these. There you go, Philip. That's you muted now. Good. Okay, if you want to close that poll, Kirsty, we shall move along. Thank you for the comments in the chat. Some good pieces of wisdom that are being shared there. The next little section, I said that being an effective virtual leader begins with being aware of who we are. And at Insights, self-awareness is essential and important ingredients that we believe. And our purpose in the world is to create a world where people truly understand themselves and others and inspired to make a positive difference in everything that they do. Insights is an organisation that's globally headquartered out of Dundee. Who on earth would ever have global headquarters in Dundee? Well, we do. And I love it because I'm from the place, but with offices all around the world. Our work is based on a Swiss psychologist, Carl Gustav Jung, and Carl Jung talked about the person who looks outside is dreaming, the person who looks inside awakens. So if you try and change other people in other situations without first of all changing yourself, then you're on a losing game. So it's better to think about, what can I change about me that will impact this relationship positive? What can I change about me that will create a better environment for the people that I lead and work with? And so if you want to improve the world, improve yourself, because that immediately improves things, and you have a bit of control over yourself, at least I would hope. And if you're familiar with Insights, we look at different types of people and different personality traits. And I just want to walk through some different styles of leadership and think about, how would you describe yourself as a leader? So I'm not sure Donald Trump has. He's probably misquoted it, Andy, but in some way. But yeah, that's improve yourself, and you should improve the world. So these words on screen here. So are you the type of leader that determines direction, or do you prefer to demonstrate loyalty and commitment? In fact, we should load another poll here, Kirsty, just to see from these 8 different characteristics, styles, behaviors, leadership approaches, which mix of these phrases describe you well? Now, on this one, you can choose more than one. So from these 8 words, maybe pick 2, 3, 4. You can pick all 8 if you want, right? But if you were to think about, what is my preferential style as a leader, which ones would I pick? Are you about injecting energy and optimism, or do you more prefer to ensure consistency and reliability? Do you like to nurture growth, or do you like to establish strategic principles? Do you do both of those things? Yeah, just maybe pick 2 or 3, maybe 4. I don't know. Certainly more than one. Perhaps not as many as 8, although I know you've got a very sound argument for doing all 8 of these. I know I do, but if I think about where my preference is, or how I would describe my approach, or how others would describe me, how the beautiful lady next door would describe me, right? She would certainly pick certain words that I would probably agree with. She'd probably be right. As that poll's loading, how are we doing on the percentage completion on that one, Kirsty?
80%.
20% of us doing our emails or thinking long and hard, and the other 80% of us are hashtag on it. Love it.
88%. Will we stop it there?
Oh, we're up, yeah.
Okay.
A few more people, perhaps. So here's our collective today. So, gosh, more than half of us like to inject energy and optimism and determine direction. So the words on the slide, well, there they are on the right of the slide, right? So the red and yellow. Well, the colours will become relevant in a moment or two. Many of us like to establish effective relationships and nurture growth. In fact, you've probably picked quite a few characteristics. But when you think about the difference of this group, and we've selected all across this wheel, you have your own unique words that you have, well, not unique words, but you have uniquely picked your choice or your selection out of those 8 words that are true for you. Somebody might have picked none of your words and picked completely all the rest of the words. And that doesn't mean they're right or wrong, it's just difference, right? So, and at Insights, that we would say the importance of valuing difference is key, but actually to understand difference and think about, if you're the type of person that injects energy and optimism and likes to determine direction, yet you're working with people who like to establish strategic principles, those things can coexist, right? But my leadership style, I have to adapt that to create the right environment for that other person to thrive. And I did say today, part of the focus is to think about who we are, but also be aware of the impact that we have with and for and on other people. So thank you for that poll. Just going to bring to life what the colours are here. So at Insights, we use this language of colour to describe different styles and energies that we have in our leadership. The red ones we call fiery red because it's about being purposeful, competitive, demanding, determined, and strong-willed and purposeful. It's about getting stuff done, doing it quickly. It's about being on the money, getting pace, building energy, building momentum. So that determining direction is about making a choice to drive things forward. And some of the hints and tips for us to lead in a virtual world and access that fiery red energy that we have, right? So is to set some kind of rhythm and pace where people are focused on the big things, you know, and instead of having perhaps the hour-long, 2-hour-long, half-day-long, day-long, 2-day-long, week-long meetings that we might have had, like our meetings in the virtual space tend to be a bit more shorter and punchier, right? This session probably would have been a 3-day session where we're doing it live face-to-face, but we're down to 45 minutes because we're doing it virtually. So the red energy in us wants the more short, punchy stuff, and it highlights achievements, big and small, that create forward momentum. So if there's something on that slide that you think, yeah, my meeting should be shorter, and they should be more punchy, and they should be focused on what did we achieve, and how are we moving forward. Think about how you can do that and bring that to your business. Moving along to the yellow words that we said, injecting energy and optimism and establishing effective relationships. A few other words on there. We call this energy like a sunshine yellow energy, right? That brings more relaxed, more informal, and even fun into the environment, right? All the kind of strange backgrounds that we've been played with for a while on Zoom and you know, the WhatsApp banter and having beers on a Friday and quizzes and all that kind of nonsense. It's not nonsense. It's actually informal social connection that we're doing that creates cohesion within teams, and it helps teams create more flow and be more agile. And the yellow energy in us helps embrace the new situation. And I love the word play. How could we be playful with a situation and not get so kind of down about it, but think, well, let's move things around about it. So if you find that's a type of characteristic that you have to play with ideas, play with suggestions, play with visions, play with possibilities, then your yellow energy is probably kicking in. And typically, you know, the people who you lead and work with who have yellow energy, because it's a fun energy that's coming at you with a hustle and a bustle. And but there's this real seriousness part to this sunshine yellow energy that really finds ways to connect, collaborate, create a team space, but do it with a smile on our face, right? So if you, it sounds like this group is a group that likes to inject energy and optimism, certainly collectively, and that's needed just now. And who's it? Somebody put something in the, yeah, David, around not necessarily blind optimism, realistic optimism. I love that. Sometimes our yellow energy will take us to blind optimism. That's okay too, but actually in this, to be optimistic with and realistic as well, it's almost paradoxical, that, isn't it? Maybe paradoxical would be a pessimistic optimist. I'm going to stop there because I'm talking myself down a rabbit hole. But you get the idea. There's something about bringing that informal optimism, inject some energy, because it's needed. Hope is needed right now. Thanks, David. So that's the yellow. And then if I move along to the green words, we talk about green being earth green energy, and it's a much more paced energy, right? I talked about the empathy and encouraging and caring and sharing, patient and relaxed, and in these point in times where some organizations are experiencing furloughs and accessing government schemes all around the globe or in our country, or redundancies, you know, how do you demonstrate loyalty and commitment, and how do you remain true to your values and with integrity as we go through these tough commercial moments for the businesses that we work in? My own organization is experiencing that very now. So there is something about tapping into this energy or this leadership style that we have that shows a bit more care and support in this situation, that encourages our people and it tries to coach for results and shows and demonstrates trust and invests a little bit more time. And actually, if it's a style that we don't use so much, it can be quite tiring. Actually, we could be exhausted just showing care and support all day. Doesn't that sound crazy, right? But that's the truth. And some of our people, let's face it, need a bit more care and a bit more support. And it can be exhausting doing that if you're not used to using or playing this energy. In the same way, it can be exhausting to try and do the yellow stuff or the red stuff if you're not used to doing it. So this is a muscle. If you think about these colors as a muscle that we need to work, and the more we work it, the better we can get at it. So that's the earth green energy. Is there anything there that you need to reflect on? And then last, certainly not least, would be the blue words. We call this a cool blue energy. That's a bit more formal, a bit more precise, deliberate, and questioning, and a bit more cautious. And how do we get the strategic principles? Because the direction can be difficult, but we can understand the principles. And if we can get some consistency and reliability back into our businesses, back into our systems, back into our processes, that will help our people move along. So with your people, it could be rhythms of frequent check-ins and meetings, the regular daily stand-ups, like the agile methodology that I'm sure some of you might be familiar with or will be very familiar with. In fact, it's just naturally happened, right, that many of us are getting to these regular daily stand-ups. Look at me standing up here while well, I don't know if you can see me standing up. I'm standing up, I'm not sitting, there you go. But how do we get into regular daily stand-ups with our people that we might do on a shop floor or that we might do in the office, like a check-in meeting? And because it's virtual, there tends to be more equal time and space, and people can comment in the chat, they can think, they can input. It actually helps those of us with a more introspective presence to contribute a little bit more in the virtual environment, because we're not in the spotlight isn't on us in a meeting. And the cool blue energy helps us bring structure, which has very much been needed over the past few months, certainly in many of the organizations I've been working with. So a little dance around these color energies. And Kirsty's going to load another poll. This will be the final poll of the day. I think it'll be the final poll anyway, where having heard a little bit more about these 4 leadership styles, and don't think about them as 4 separate leaders, think of them about you as a leader has 4 different styles within you, and you just use some a little bit more than the others, but the situation and demands are such that you have to bring some of them along. And then this time, instead of picking as many out of the 8, is there one phrase or one of these characteristics that you think is relevant for you to focus on, for you to improve as a leader, and choose that one? Is there something about, actually, I need to work on nurturing growth, or I need to work on delivering key results right now, or helping my people deliver key results? And I'd like you to pick one of these, and we're going to do a quick action planning exercise with whichever one you pick. So I'll try my best to go silent and give you a moment or two to pick one of those 8, and Kirsty can tell us if 80% or 88% or maybe even 100% might pick one.
Still building, give it a few more seconds. Few more, we're almost there.
Marcus, while we're waiting for the results, how often do you see people changing colours or merging colours as time goes on?
So any system in the world that's like Insights, as people assess who they are or do a bit of analysis who they are, after about 6 to 9 months, 70% of people change. That doesn't mean that they dramatically change and become something completely different. It means that they evolve slightly. Some people do flip, you know, in life situations, really bad stuff happens, makes people flip to be something completely different. That means 30% of us are pretty consistent all the time, but like maybe another 30%, another third of us change and evolve a little bit, and then 30% of us go on a bigger journey. There's moments in life like midlife crises and all these kind of things where more dramatic things happen, of course. But we're human beings that evolve and grow. And if like Rhiannon's comment there, or it was, I think it was, yeah, about them, if picking up this analogy of muscles, if we if we aren't used to injecting energy and optimism, but we try and do it every day for a year, we'll get better at it. And as that muscle gets better, you know, it's changed who we are, you know. And the Carl Jung quote that I was referencing earlier on about if you look inside, you can awaken different parts of who you are to help you evolve and grow. That doesn't mean you need to lose the core of who you are, Aidan, as you would see you nodding there, right? You know, it doesn't mean you need to lose a core of who you are, but you can become a more dynamic individual, a dynamic human being, and ultimately, in this context, a more effective leader and in a virtual space, you know. So we all have and can continue to learn. So hope that helps and pass the time a little bit at least. Good question. I can see that 26, even though the majority of us picked injecting energy and optimism, there's a fascination about that one today that 26% of us think I'm going to focus a little bit more on that. So that's great, and demonstrating loyalty and commitment for the one or two of us that picked that, and ensuring consistency and reliability. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is whichever one you picked, try and remember that or write it down or do whatever you would do to recall it. I'm going to go through a quick action planning exercise if I can. I'm going to do this at pace if that's okay. So we're going to go through 4 stages. The first one is to articulate why is this important. So what I'd like you to do on a notepad or digitally on screen, or at a minimum, think about it, is think of 5 different reasons as to why you improving or becoming more effective in that one area is important to you. And there's some sample questions there on screen. It might impact your KPIs, might be important to the people and projects you're leading, etc. So use those questions as stimulation, but I'm only going to give you 30 seconds to write down 3, 4, or 5 reasons why it's important for you to be more effective in that area. I shall go silent for the remainder of 20 seconds. Okay, a few of you still scribbling away, some of you thinking, and some of you smiling, and some of you pondering, and all sorts of stuff. So the reason we ask why it's important is because if we can understand why it's important for us to be more effective in an area, it's like putting the petrol or the gas in the tank, right? It gives us the energy and the fuel. So as you look down at what you've written, or reflect on what you've captured, or think about why it's important for you to be more effective as a leader and how others might benefit, or how you might benefit, then that gives you energy, right? It gives you a purpose and a drive to go after it. This is the cool blue action planning step. The next step is a fiery red action planning step. And before I load it, I'm going to talk you through what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to write 1 or 2 really simple and clear action steps, but not big scary ones that you may or may not do. Really simple action steps that you're absolutely convinced 100% that you can do. So as basic as saying, I'm going to spend 5 minutes after the session thinking about what I'm going to do, or I'm going to have a conversation with one person, or I'm going to put half an hour in my diary where I'm going to plan how I'm going to inject energy and optimism, or I'm going to, something that you are completely committed to, because that will give you some energy and some momentum to get started. I guess like a Chinese proverb would be, 1,000-mile journey begins with a single step. What I'm looking for is the first single step, not the first mile, not the first, I know some people are ambitious here, but I don't want you to write an action that you're scared of. I want you to write a simple action that gets you started. Because once you started, you're on the journey. So hopefully you have written down 1 or 2 really easy first actions that get you started. Now, if it is a 1,000-mile journey to be more effective, it won't be 1,000 miles, it'll be much simpler than that. But now I want to project you forward to having gone on that journey and become more effective, and get in touch with our sunshine yellow energy to think about having achieved and developed, become competent as a leader in that space. Maybe it's demonstrating loyalty, commitment, determining direction, whichever one you picked. I want you to, in 60 seconds, describe that future state, that future you, as best you can. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What kind of things will you be doing and saying? What might you have stopped doing and saying? What kind of feedback will you receive? And if you were to achieve it, how would you celebrate, acknowledge, and reward yourself for growing and being a better human being, a better leader? 60 seconds to write down and describe your future state as best you can. Okay, some people still scribbling away. Apologies for interrupting as you do that. Some people pondering, some people just like, huh, cool. I'd like you to just, this is a little bit odd, but I'd like you to take just a breath, just, and let out a breath at this point in time. Because what we've done 3 out of 4 steps here, we've articulated why it's important. That's like the juice and the fuel in our vehicle. We've identified how we might get started, the 1 or 2 simple steps to get us started and get us going. As Richard said, you know, a lot of this participants will be on many of these journeys, right? But on this journey. And then we've articulated actually what our destination might look like, a future state. So just take a breath and acknowledge that you've got these 3 things. And then the next piece is getting in touch with this earth green energy to say, you don't need to go on this journey on your own. In fact, sometimes it's better to do it together. And I'd like you to capture the names of 2 people that can support you to develop this attribute and develop your competency as a leader. One person who's a bit of a bugger and will hold your feet to the fire, and another person that you know that will support and encourage you along the way. Who are 2 people that you can tell that you want to become a better leader that injects energy and optimism, or that nurtures trust, or whatever you picked? Somebody that you think will be on your side and will help you with that. Maybe they can mentor you, partner with you, might be somebody on this call. And then another person who you know, I know who you know this person is in your life, right? That will kind of go, did you do that then? Did you see it? You said you were going to do it. Did you do it? Really? Did you? Really? Who's that person? And hopefully you got those 2 people. Now your choice as to whether you want these 2 people to help you on the journey. But I often think it's nice to have an encourager and nice to have somebody with a bit of a whip. The carrot and the whip there, eh? So if you've got 2 people, that's brilliant, you know? So there's another little section for me to go before I wrap up, but hopefully that has been already of some value for you to reflect on the different traits of great and successful virtual leaders, and then to reflect on your own leadership style, about who you are and how you lead, the impact you have on others, and to think about, I'm definitely free Aidan to be one of those persons. Please make me the encouraging, nice one, but I could be the other one if you want me to. Yeah, reflected a little bit on our own style, and also thought about how could we just improve ourselves by one of these traits, right? Because if we can improve ourselves a little bit, right, then our performance will be enhanced, we'll be more effective, and that will hopefully positively impact the people and the organizations that we lead. The final piece I wanted to come to, I mentioned right at the front end about talking about transformational leadership. And forgive me that this is like the 3rd model already in a session, but hopefully it's rich content, and it might be that one of the sections has really captured you. The transformational leadership model that we talk about in Insights has at the top results leadership, where the red and blue come together and creates this purple results leadership. And then at the bottom, or the south of this circle, there's something where the sunshine yellow and earth green come together, that's relationship leadership, and some definitions of those different styles of leadership that we bring. I also talked up front about the importance of being centered as leaders right now, but there is a tension between a centered leader and a visionary leader. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of these opposing tensions. Well, thank you, Shona. It's great to have you on the call today too. Let me talk a little bit more about this and then come back. So a centered leader is somebody who is aware of who they are, they're aware of the journey that they've been on, they're steeped in their purpose, they are clear about the things that they value, and they're very present in the here and now. And the visionary leader has their head up, and they're trying to create the new potential and dream of things that may come and have foresight and farsight. Now, there's something about the tension of how these two styles of leadership can coexist. As I was growing up, my mother used to always say to me, "You're away with the fairies, laddie." And I definitely prefer that visionary space. It's good for me. But when I'm away with the fairies and my head's in the clouds, if it's not grounded and centered in something, then the potential of the idea gets lost. And the same way for those of us that are really centered and grounded, if we don't have our head up to the horizon, we might miss the opportunity. So we need to be centered and we need to be visionary. These things have to coexist for us. And then the other tension is the north-south part of that little circle wheel of relationships and results. So if you're a leader that is brilliant at driving and delivering results, but the relationships are in tatters along the way and it's results at no matter what the cost, then it's not a sustainable result, right? We know that as leaders, because you need the relationships to sustain the results. And on the other side of that, if you just create the relationships and get everybody together, but you don't actually deliver anything, well, what was the point, right? You know, you had a good time, but did you really make any traction or make a difference? So there's something about how can we as leaders build the relationships, nurture that environment, create the relationships so that the results will flow, and how can we drive the results and deliver the results in a way that develops the relationships. So the tension between the centered leader needs to be visionary and the visionary leader needs to be centered. The results leader needs to build relationships and the relationship leader needs to deliver results. So just think about how these four transformational leadership aspects, how we can access them and where our bias is. And then I have a point of view about just now, because right up front, I said leadership begins with being self-aware. And in these moments, these tough moments to navigate for us in the world right now, visionary leadership is quite difficult, right? Because we still don't quite know what's happening as second spikes come in, as people going back to, like, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? So the vision is not so clear. The landscapes for results have either got dramatically better or dramatically worse, or it's kind of stayed somewhere about the middle. But it's tough to be in the visionary and results space. And the relationship leader, a lot of our content today is to be thinking about how to lead in a virtual environment and create the right environment for relationships to exist so that the results can flow. And we're all embracing the technology, and as human beings, we're getting good at it and we're learning, but it's still work in progress. A few months in, we're still work in progress. Whereas centered leadership, we have absolutely everything that we need here today in our lives to help us be centered as leaders. And if we can get ourselves in these moments centered, it will help us get our head up to the future and see the vision. It will help us to nurture relationships, and it will help us to deliver the results. So my point of view that I'd like to leave with you in the next couple of slides is to think about how can we be centered as leaders, and more than that, how can we be centered as virtual leaders. So whatever you have taken away from the session today, if you've learned a couple of things, if you have a good action plan that will help you to center yourself as leaders. It's like one of these Fitbit things. I'm wearing my wife's Fitbit because she refuses to wear it, so that's why I have a pink Fitbit on. And there's different parts of how this Fitbit works for me. And for it to be centered as a virtual leader, it begins with self-awareness, right? If we are aware of who we are and the impact we have on others, then we can start to build some self-esteem for ourselves, but more importantly, some sense of self-worth for our people and sense of purpose for our people, so that they can have some beliefs, some confidence, some potency, but that starts with us. And then if you have belief and confidence, then you can be more on purpose and really clear about where you're going and who you're going, and for your people to be clear about the purpose that they're delivering to and working together on that purpose. Then as leaders in our lives, we can begin to express ourselves more authentically, be more transparent with our people, and that helps us be more resilient to the stress. And these are stressful times for us and for our people, but by being aware, building our own sense of self-worth and esteem, we can really be on purpose, express ourselves authentically and be more resilient. One thing that we'd like to do at Insights to support you on that, seeing as I keep saying it begins with self-awareness, we have, and I'm sure a few of you are aware of this, we have a system where you can complete an online evaluation, learn more about these colour energies, and we'd love to give you a free, one of our free profiles, a 25-page profile that describes your strengths and weaknesses and your style. And I see Shona is Shona Marshall's on the call today. I'm sure she'd love to follow up with you in a conversation about that. Some of you may have experienced it before. You might like to experience it again, because these moments have changed us, right? These colour energies come and go, and what has been changing for you. So if you've experienced it before, experience it again. There might be something really of value for you, and that would at least get you on the journey with our self-awareness. A quote before a bit of a couple of next steps is, if you're experiencing these times as a struggle and tough, then I just kind of love this thought of the strength that we are building for ourselves and our organization in these times, right? Our organizations are rocking, we might be rocking, but we're building strength and capability in these times. And the way to do that is to be out in the storm, right? And not stuck in the forest, right? So if you have been struggling and battling for months, you have built great strength and great capability, and that's fantastic. So you'll reap the reward of that over the next coming years, although it's tough moments right now. If you need help with your team, a couple of you messaged me actually on the call. Very happy to help you with your leadership, with your teams. Insights can help you with that. Shona can help you, and I'm sure Kirsty can point you in the right direction as well. And you know what? There's many organisations that can support you on this type of stuff, but we certainly can if you want us to. Or maybe there's just something about your own leadership that's bubbled up for you today that you want some help. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. Very happy to do that. And then final piece. We'll invite you to complete an online evaluator questionnaire. And my colleague, Kirsty, will type a link into the chat. And all you need to do is click that link, go on, use our referral code Leadership Webinar, and with our compliments, we will provide you one of our profiles and help you on your journey of self-awareness. Kirsty, I'll maybe come back to you in case you want to facilitate any questions. But thank you everybody for your time today. I'm around for the next 5 or 10 minutes. We're nearly at time, but if anybody wants to hang around, or if you need to move on, then so be it. Kirsty, back to you.
Thank you so much, Marcus. It was a brilliant session, so interactive and lots for us all to take away and think about personally as well as with our organisation. So thank you so much. Just as Marcus said, he's still on the line, so if anybody would like to post any questions or even come on live, I'm happy for you to ask Marcus anything directly. And as he said, I've got a copy of the recording. We can share the slides, and we'll send out another link for the survey and the follow-up email as well. But if you've got any final questions, happy to take these now. Aidan, I think you've got your hand up.
Marcus, I'd be interested, given the number of teams that you interact with clients, etc., around the world, what have you seen as being perhaps the most important collab in terms of the most important intervention that you're making at the moment to get these teams most effective?
Great question. You know, so our business is an events-driven business, right? That we rely on face-to-face delivery, right? So we've taken a smashing in the market. So the clients who we are working with, initially it was about how do you deliver learning in a virtual space. So that was a real big pain point, where we have a practitioner community globally of 12,000 practitioners in all sorts of organizations. So we had to equip them to do that. That's not your question, however. Your question is, what is their pain points? That was the initial pain point that we felt. The pain point is really tied up in this point of view that I shared towards the end of the call about how do they center themselves as leaders when there's so much changing, right? The dramatic changing of the landscape, you know, massive redundancies, you know, organizations going to the wall. Some organizations thriving massively, right? I think of the Una Pizza Oven. I was chatting to chief exec of that they were like sold out in April, right? They hit all their targets in April. So there's some organizations in the pharma industry, in the tech industry, supermarkets, etc., that are just, they haven't been able to cope with how successful they've been. Others going to the wall. So whichever way things were going, there was something about this need to be centered. And as people accessing government schemes around the world, you know, in Holland, it's like their furlough thing is 90%, but you work full time, right? Gosh, that's a much better idea than paying 80% and you don't work, right? So, so many different schemes where people were out of a business, in a business, going through redundancies. So the need for leaders to actually be aware and be centered in times of pressure, and then all these traits around showing more empathy and how to communicate and engage and enroll. These have been the major challenges. I worked with a big pharmaceutical company, Sanofi, and I was working with their Asia division a couple of months back, and now we're working with the North American entities in a couple of weeks. And for them, it was around resilience and stress management, which is all about, again, being centered, right? You know, so these themes and challenges, possibly that you might have been facing personally or your organization's facing, that's what some of the big organizations have been facing, in my experience. So hope that helps. Great, fascinating question, fascinating topic. Be interested in other people's views. Roger, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. Fabulous presentation, really helpful, really clear and concise, great stuff. The question I have for you really has to do with your reds and your yellows are outgoing type, and the blues and the greens are more reserved. How do you, the reds and yellows presumably thrive in this kind of world of online talking and that kind of thing, and the greens and blues would find it more difficult. How do you, what's your advice to engage with those greens and blues that find this kind of environment so intimidating?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, it's actually, if you localize all the colors to yourself, it's that red and yellow energy in yourself, right, that would express and probably embrace the change a bit more, right? That's because it's an extroverted energy, it's outgoing, whereas the blue and green energies for ourselves would be more introspective and more kind of perhaps analytical and wanting to keep things a little bit more stable. Yeah, actually, I have quite a lot of experience in the virtual space where teams, a lot of, perhaps, have we done robust research on this? This might be anecdotal, so let's take it that way, Roger, right? That where people who have more of an introspective preference that perhaps lead with the green and blue energies actually are finding themselves more productive in this environment because they're at home, they're in their own space, they feel a little bit safer. Okay, there's distractions, right? But they're not in an office environment where there's hubbub and open offices, and they can plan their day. They can, and in meetings they can choose to input or not. Whereas when they're face to face, they feel a bit more. So there is a counter argument to what you're saying, that to just pay attention to, because different individuals are experiencing this in a very different way. But certainly for us as leaders, knowing that the energies of fiery red and sunshine yellow that we have and our people have probably are up for embracing something new, probably are up for giving it a go, probably are up for having a bit of fun with it. And but the green and blue energies within us are wanting to kind of check in on people. They're wanting to ground things in reality. They're wanting to get things right, and they're wanting to have some time and space. So I find one of the, so in terms of delivery in these environments, Roger, as I'm sure you find, I think you're a bit of an expert in some of this stuff too, is the ability to kind of create a fair space for everybody to check in, and you can kind of, because all the faces are on camera, it's not like you're sitting in a room where you can't see people's faces. You can see everybody's faces. You're looking into their eyes, and actually it's creating more, I don't know if democracy is the right word, but there's more contribution I'm experiencing from teams rather than perhaps more likely dominant preference that happens when a group is face to face. So you might have different experiences or same experiences, but that's where my thoughts go, Roger. So
that's very helpful. Thank you.
Cool.
Tony, did you have a question?
Yes. How do you create the dynamism which you get normally in a face-to-face meeting?
Do you mean in like a virtual meeting or a?
We're now constrained, instead of having a meeting around a boardroom table or whatever, where there's a dynamism of the people being there in person, face to face. We're doing this on screen.
Yeah.
So how do you create that same dynamism?
I don't think it's the same dynamism. I think it's a different dynamism.
So okay.
Yeah, but that's the first thing, eh? Like I think human instinct. I know that's not your question, Tony. I'm just probably where I'm taking it. So forgive me, but and I'm being playful a little bit. But first of all, we have to accept that we'll not create the same dynamic. It will be different dynamics that can be equally good. You know, I work with executive teams that are, you know, obsessed with backgrounds and being playful with all that stuff, that creates a different dynamic. And then because everybody's connected, I don't know, lots of people are connected on these devices, much more. I feel like I'm in like 50 WhatsApp groups myself, you know, even one for my street. And the level of connection and level of relationship and the home life coming in a bit more, which is creating much more personalism, is a different dynamic. That doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It just means it's different. And the dynamism, maybe the pace, the energy of working together around a collective whiteboard or an idea and building off each other. It's how do you create that in a different way? And it might take a bit more time, but I'm definitely advising teams to have shorter, punchier meetings more regularly. Instead of everybody getting in and a board getting in and saying, let's solve things in the next 3 hours, actually meet every day for 50 minutes and take smaller bite chunks out of it and move the project and the initiatives forward, nudge by nudge, inch by inch. So I don't know if that helps, but that's what I'm experiencing with the teams I'm working with. If it's not, Tony, ping me offline. I'm happy to pick up the phone and have a quick further conversation with you if you have a specific need, because I feel like I might not be hitting what you're looking for with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Richard, did you have a question? Richard Smith, I just wondered if you had a question because you come off mute. That's okay.
That's right, no.
Well, I'm just conscious of time, if that's okay. We'll share Marcus and Kerry's details. As I say, we'll share the Insights profile details to access that afterwards and copy of the recording of the call. And if we can help with anything or connect you with people who want to do follow-up sessions, very happy to do that. So I'd just like to thank Marcus again for a fabulous session. We really enjoyed that. I'm sure everybody agrees that we're on the call. And thanks again to Insights also for sponsoring our Young Director category of Director of the Year. So just as a reminder, it's on the 8th of September. It's our first time doing a virtual awards, and hopefully we can celebrate the success, something we've been talking about today, of some of the great leaders across Scotland. And for those that are not from the Scottish region, there's ones for all our other regions across the UK as well. So thanks again for joining us and hope to see you soon.
Thanks for today. Have a good rest of the day. Bye now.